Hello and welcome to another episode of the Musso podcast. We're your hosts, Ngone, Hadi, and Jama. We're so glad that you're here with us again. We hope you've enjoyed the previous episodes and that you're here because you actually love what you've been hearing. Before we get into things, ladies, how are you guys doing?
We've been good. Chilling as always, getting pressed in this panini press. But alhamdulillah, things have been well. I am home. I am sitting here live and direct with these two.
Woo! I know. Finally.
No more technical difficulties.
Village people.
Yeah, our village people cannot stop us, so we out here, y'all. But Jama, how are you?
Tired. After surviving COVID, and coming out of an 18-day isolation, I can only say alhamdulillah.
We thank God for life.
So yeah, I'm good.
Go, how are you?
I'm good. I'm okay. Life is lifing. Everything is going well. Work and stuff. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm here.
You people are so
COVID free.
You people are so
surviving COVID. I'm here, Gambia.
There's never a positive. How are you doing over here? It's always.
But I said you're good though.
Yeah, I said I'm good.
But it's after like a sigh. It's like.
Because the heaviness is
because
heavy.
Adulting be adulting. We're here on this podcast, and this is a podcast where we share a microphone for fresh conversations on current affairs and women's realities beyond a single story. And what's our current affair this week? Women's Day. Yes, the topic for this week is going to be focused on Women's Day, the most important day in the whole year. And to start that off, before we get into things, as usual, we have a quote by myself and then Ngone, a poem I wrote for Gambian women, and it's only fitting that we share it with our amazing Gambian women. Yeah, it goes. We are here to break the tables they comfortably sit at. We are here to change the status quo. We are a new breed of Gambian women, and we will be damned if they silence us.
Woo!
They're Gambian women.
Oh, sorry. Hey.
Yeah.
My A came too early.
Like we said, this week we're going to look at Women's Day. Happy Women's Day.
Happy Women's Day.
I'm asking a question. Is it a Happy Women's Day?
In this Gambian context, it is not.
Yeah.
Because even though that is your favorite quote, you know what my favorite quote is? Gambia dunya for them.
Gambia for them.
Gambia?
Oh, we can remix it. Gambian women, then you're them.
Gambian women.
Then you're them.
Exactly.
But Gambia as a whole cannot go.
No.
I don't believe in that project anymore.
Then prepare once I put them. First of all, we're going to wish Gambian women and all African women a happy Women's Day, and we hope you're getting spoiled, you're getting your flowers today, that you're just living a good life and enjoying everything.
But
yeah, we hope
getting reparations.
We hope the men are reparating too.
Yes, we hope that you're getting reparations. And the theme for this year's Women's Day is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. And I think that's a good thing to look at when we're asking the question. Is it a happy Women's Day for Gambian women and a Gambian nanya for them?
Do them?
What do you think, Hadi?
Do them. I'm just put it that way, do them. And even the theme is so loaded, just looking at it. Women in leadership, and like, given how COVID has gone, there has been so many what's the word? The inequalities have exacerbated during COVID for women, for girls and women especially.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was reading this article on the New York Times about this, basically mothers and mothering basically during the pandemic, and it is ridiculous because you're having women that are working nonstop, taking meetings while changing diapers at the same time.
Yep.
And so if COVID has shown anything, is that we have a long way to go. So even before talking about leadership, we have to talk about some form of equity. And this is a very ambitious goal for this 2021, when honestly our only goal should be survival.
Equity is very vital to survival, don't you think?
No, it is extremely vital to survival. And again, just given how everything is going, the way I am just seeing women struggling in this past 2020 and in this 2021, It's a lot. There's nothing happy going on. Like, ain't nothing happy about Happy Women's Day, y'all.
I think it's good that you mentioned, women diapers and stuff, because I'm thinking and looking at it in a Gambian context where if you're a wife and you're home, you're not going to work, then you're also expected to cook and, take care of the cleaning and everything else in addition to your working from home. And that, I think that can be a lot.
And I think our people, we have this, me speaking personally, I know that like when you tell people you're working from home, there's an assumption that you're not working.
Yeah.
So they can think that like you're just laying there and you're just in bed chilling, when it's like you're emailing so much that your back is starting to hurt. But then they expect that the chores will still be done while you're at home and you're responding to things, and then there's a lot of meetings and all of that at the same time. So it is not working at all.
So to move away from the morbid and the negative, I think for me, looking at the theme, really, it's what opportunities there are to celebrate the many, many incredible women who have been leading the COVID-19 response around the whole world, but especially in the Gambia. I think about a week or two ago, I saw this Gambian doctor that got this award for her role in the response, and I think she's actually the only female doctor at the sanatorium. At some point she was. Yeah. And so for me, and also as a young woman who's working in COVID response, for me it's an opportunity to really stop and think. I mean, it's Women's Day, but it's also COVID anniversary for Gambia, because it was around this time that we had our first case. Yeah. And I really just want to stop and reflect on how I have seen my colleagues, especially my female colleagues, just step up and take up responsibility, at the level of the office, but also at home and in the community. So we keep talking about this triple burden for women, where you're looking at your responsibilities at a professional level, while also having to balance that with your roles and your responsibilities at home and your duty to community as a health worker or as somebody who works in the sector who people can look up to as a person they can trust for information and all of that. So for me, I think the theme really is an opportunity to shine a light, because it's really easy for these women to be forgotten. And when we think about, so the issue of equity, the issue of leadership, the issue of access, you look at health workers, you try to look at the different roles and who's in the bottom roles, who are the people that we probably will not see, the nurses, the cleaners, all of those people. The majority of them are women. And so it's important that we pause and reflect on how each one of them is doing something that contributes towards what we could probably see as global success, if anything at all. I think right now we can start to build hope around COVID because of the vaccines and all. And even with vaccine development, all the many women who've been involved in that, the many women who volunteered as participants in the trials. So for me, I think it's really just a moment for us to stop and think, what happens after COVID? In a post-COVID world, how do we ensure that these skills, this expertise continues to be harnessed and women are placed at the fore, because we continue to show that we get the work done.
I think that's very, 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 very important, especially just Gomnokowe in terms of how like all the people that are unseen. I mean, generally in life, that's why they have that stupid behind every great man there is a woman quote. But it's true, like, because in all of these structures, it's the women, and it's the women of color, particularly the Black women, that are driving factors behind all the successes that we see, but they're not recognized. So it is important to acknowledge that and to make that the focus also, instead of like consistently focusing on the negative.
I mean, we can still look at the negatives, because I feel like what you pointed out is right. The gaps are still there. So even with who gets help, and the issue of violence, we can get into, of course, we're getting into all of that into the episode. But I think for us, it's really, those things are there. We can't ignore them simply because we want to say Happy Women's Day. No. But we also take the opportunity to just, say thank you, I guess, and jarama, gachengalama to the many women who are like,
No, truly thank you to them, especially to our nurses, who are usually also forgotten, because I think among some of the discrimination issues that came to light during the COVID were nurses who, I think one of them was kicked out of her family home because they feared that she would, the stigma and everything that they had to deal with, you know.
They're
So
not paid.
yeah,
The
gatengala.
allowances, it's a
The
whole lot of
allowances.
stuff.
A few
And,
months ago, they were protesting at both male and female nurses were protesting at the PMO office because they were not paid their salaries for months. They're working without any, you know, extra risk
Incentives.
allowance or anything like that.
You know
So
what upsets me? When people say that, oh, it's their duty to protect, so they're supposed. It's so selfish to think about that. You're not the one putting your life at
Exactly.
the risk. You're
you
not the
can't
one in
even
the front
protect anyone if you
No.
yourself are not protected.
Exactly.
You have to be, but all of it are balangan and never. That's what it is. You need to be okay
Yeah.
before you can extend,
Yeah.
you know, a helping hand. So I guess this is an opportunity to think about all of those inequalities and inequities and,
yeah.
you know, get the Gambia government to do their work.
Let me keep quiet. I just got here, so I will keep quiet.
Please, Balan, you
When I'm ready to leave,
No.
I will say what I have to say.
Can you say it outside of Musso, please?
Never. I will not be silenced. Anyway, keep going.
Anyway, yeah, it's good that, you know, we're recognizing, or we've recognized all of these women who've made amazing contributions in their own ways in the fight against COVID. But we also have to, you know, be realistic and look at the impact, the negative impact that COVID has had on the lives of women and girls, especially in relation to GBV. Global perspective, WHO, UNFPA, you know, they've all reported that there's been an increase in domestic violence cases caused by, you know, the fact that people are locked in with the abusers, and there is, you know, little chance or little means of getting help in cases of abuse. We've seen these numbers rising in France, in the USA, in England, and according to the NGBV as well, Network Against Gender-Based Violence, Gambia is also no different. We've seen, you know, cases of reports of rape increasing. We're not saying the cases are increasing, but there have been more reports of trigger warning, rape and sexual abuse. You know, we've also seen how other vulnerable groups have been affected by COVID-19. And I think it's very sad that in our COVID response, it's as if the government neglected to deal with that aspect. Because in the Gambia, I think people were locked in for about 6 or 7 months. There was a period of lockdown for about 6 or 7 months. And for the most part of that, people were actually asked or forced to stay at home. So imagine you're staying at home with your abuser, somebody who's, you know, sexually abusing you, or your husband who's hitting you or hurting you in other ways, and there's really little means to find help. I think the government failed Gambian women and girls in that aspect.
Oh, they never tried to protect us. They've always been failures, if we're going to be honest.
True.
They
True.
talk, but what have they really done? Like what? And it's like they put up the most basic milestones for achievement, and then do nothing about it. Imagine you have a whole ministry dedicated to gender and women, but then what have they done? I remember I beefed one of my cousins. I got into a proper argument until like I was ready to block him because he said that the ministry was going to be useless. And look at who's wrong. Me, looking like a fool because the government decided to make us look like fools. But anyway, go back. Instead of protecting the vulnerable, like we're not protecting, because I keep thinking about the sex workers and the whole incident. I remember seeing it on Twitter about how basically they shouldn't be giving sex workers COVID relief. Are they not citizens of this country? And number two, who are the people that are making sure that they're not out of jobs right now? So what makes you decide that you can go and visit a sex worker, but God forbid that the sex workers have food and are able to take care of themselves and their loved ones and their families during a pandemic? And
to show the hypocrisy of it all, someone would actually rather spend money putting up an electronic billboard talking about how sex work is bad instead of actually...
Who is this someone? Name and shame.
Something Jalo. I can't remember his
name.
Traffic
lights. I don't know.
It was a traffic light.
I haven't seen it in a while.
I saw it and I was
I don't know. It's just a reflection of... I mean, it's the same thing. It's what kind of environment do we live in that allows for somebody to think about that and go pay, and the billboard people, whoever owns it, they also take the money and say, this is something that I want to put up on the space that I own. And for me, I think, obviously there's so many things that I've been pissed about over the past year, and it's really, again, back to the point that Hadi made. It's really a continuation of what has always happened. So it's not even new. If you did not care before COVID, I don't think COVID would really, really make you care. And even if you were pretending to care, you would only put up that show for a while before the masks
fall off.
So I think for me, it's also just how there was probably a refusal to acknowledge, or basically, so you know how there was also this prioritization to say, oh, we're focusing on COVID, and how it also even affected the issue of sexual and reproductive health and rights, where you have a whole, the country's only referral hospital, or the main hospital in the country, deciding, oh, we're going to focus all of our services on COVID, so everything else is currently suspended. You know, what does that mean for women? I remember Think Young Woman, we put out a statement regarding that, and it was mostly prompted by a woman who reached out to say she went to the hospital, she needed SIH services, and she could not get them because the focus was on COVID. So for me, I think it was focusing on one aspect of the pandemic and not understanding, you know, all the other things, all the other areas that are affected. And so can we even talk about a holistic response? Is that what we have had? You know, it's all focused on the health aspect. It's all focused on prevention. It's all focused on prevention messaging and testing and all. But then all of the other things obviously are a problem, because then very soon, hopefully, we're done with COVID, and then we now begin to deal with the impact of everything else that was ignored during that period.
I mean, I agree with the point about, you know, not having cared before, and then, you know, COVID just showing really how much you did not care. Because the example that comes to mind is the issue of the FGM ban and the child marriage prohibition. You know, we have leaders, our vice president, for example, was, you know, a staunch anti-FGM campaigner. And you would expect that someone like that, who a lot of young women had looked up to, young activists looked up to, you know, you come in a position of power and it's like crickets from the government when it comes to these laws. And we live in a country where these laws were associated to the former president. People see these laws as a Jammeh law. So if a new government comes in, it's been almost 5 years now, and no statement has been made, or very little, you know, very few things have been said regarding these laws. It leads people to believe that the laws are no longer in existence, and that's why we've seen an increase. There's no scientific report on this, but we're all hearing reports of, you know, FGM being practiced in remote areas, because people are hiding and doing it because ultimately they know nothing is going to happen. There's no political will from the state, a state whose, you know, second in command is a feminist and activist. It's really sad.
And it's interesting you bring up the FGM thing, because a few weeks ago we were at this commemoration of Zero Tolerance Day. And so I was on a panel where we were supposed, so it was a general panel, and the panelists was supposed to speak on different aspects, I guess, of the work around FGM. And I was supposed to speak about, you know, the role of young people, but I basically focused it on what we have already done, what we are doing. So not just identifying this is the role we can play, but what results we've been able to achieve. You know, and the chairperson, of the panel, after everything I said, because one of the big points that I raise, and this is a point that I make all the time, is that we need more spaces for intergenerational exchange, for intergenerational engagement, because we cannot continue to do this work in a fashion where everybody, every generation that comes, you start afresh. There's nothing to look back on. There's nothing to fall back on. There's no data. There are no reports. You have no knowledge whatsoever of what has been done where, what the challenges were, what were the results. You know, so I made that point. And her response basically was, okay, yeah, but you know, young people, you know, you need to be careful when you go into the communities. You need to be respectful in the way you talk. And I was just sitting there like, okay, you are a senior person at the Ministry of Gender. You do not even know the youth-led organizations or the young women-led organizations in this country doing this work. Because obviously if you knew us, if you knew about us, you would not make that comment. Because we've been doing this work in communities for how long now? You know, it picked up a lot after the first YFGM. You know, and we've never had an issue in communities. We've never had an issue in communities saying, you've been disrespectful, we're kicking you out. And for me, it was really just a moment to think, if this is the technical lead at the ministry thinking this way, what chance do we have as young women? what chance do we have of sitting at the table? Because if you already have those assumptions, they could lead to exclusion. You could easily leave people away from the decisions being made. And I remember the minister, because she has worked with us a lot, she was like, no, but the adults also need to learn to listen to the young people and the concerns they're making. But the damage was already done. What was said was already said. You know, where we had an opportunity to actually encourage this and try to find a way to make it happen, especially now that we have a ministry, it was seen as a moment to lecture to us about how we need to be careful when we go talk to communities.
I don't even know how you come up with that, because if there's one thing that the communities would do, they would let you know if you're disrespectful.
Yeah, no, but it's deflection, because if she didn't say that, then she would have to acknowledge that So it's very, very simple that they're deflecting from their responsibilities and blaming whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing on the people that are not them. It's very simple. And that's what they always do. I always think about, again, our little thing with the intergenerational dialogue.
It's been years.
It's been 30 years. I will never let this go.
It's a lot, but I think this is a good point for us to take a break, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back. We hope you've been enjoying the discussion, and we've looked at all these issues in relation to COVID and women, how it has impacted women's lives and livelihoods, how the government has failed Gambian women in its COVID response. But we also, I think, need to look at advocacy for equity and equality in the Gambia, because this is something that, as far as we can remember, has been going on for decades. We can't even really tell when, advocacy for women's rights in the Gambia started, but it's been going on generation after generation, our mothers to us to the next generation. And I feel like we've made some strides as a country, right? We've made some strides. We've enacted laws, especially in terms of our laws. We've enacted a lot of laws to protect the rights of women and girls. We have the Women's Act, we've had the Children's Act, Domestic Violence Act, Sexual Offences Act. We have our Trafficking in Persons Act, Tourism Offences Act. These are all laws which contain provisions that protect the rights of women and girls. But do you think there is more that can be done in advocating for equity and equality in the Gambia?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah. Y'all should see us. We all looked at each other like, did she just ask that?
I mean, yeah, it's a rhetorical question, of course, because
I think some days you sit down and you think, oh, we're making progress, like you said, because there are certain things that have happened. There's so many changes that we need to acknowledge and celebrate, of course. And then some other days, like, you just sit there and you're like, have we even started?
Yeah.
Where are we headed? Because there's no direction, there's no leadership, there's no coordination, there's no funding, there's no support, there's no...
First of all, I have a question. What really has your Ministry of Gender done for the promotion of equity and equality since it was established? 2-3 years ago?
It's been 2 years.
3? We're in 2021.
No, 2. It's been 2 years being set up.
Wasn't it in 2018?
No, 2019.
2 years, 3 years. It's still a long time for a strategic plan. I mean...
No, I think I don't know. I have asked this question a lot. And I remember when I wrote that article, saying, will the real vice president stand up, and making that advocacy point around, let's have a separate ministry. I remember how excited we all were, when the announcement was made, that we have a ministry. But I think, I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and try to diagnose their problems because that's not my job. But we're still waiting. I've been asking myself that question as well, you know, and I ask this from a position where I belong to a young women-led organization that, if not anything at all, people know us. People know about the work that we do. And if it is a case of, oh, the ministry is developing its strategic plan or it's developing its structures, I would feel like they would try to involve as many stakeholders as possible. They would try to involve as many actors as possible. But I have not seen that engagement. You know, maybe it's happening with other people. I've not seen it with us. I've not seen it happen. And so I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what's happening at the level of the ministry. I'm not exactly sure because I'm also thinking we've had such high profile cases, for example, of the sexual violence cases that we have been talking about. So Justice for Mama, I Am Tufa, Surviving Melville. We've had all of those, and all of these happened while we had a Ministry of Women's Affairs, and there was nothing from the ministry. And I think for me at that point, I really just decided, you know what, I'm not going to have any expectations on what they're going to do. Because if we have such high profile cases that everyone is talking about, it's clear that the victims and the survivors are going through so much, including being abused and, you know, insulted, especially online. Publicly. And the ministry continue. And then you have the cases where we're talking about instances of interference from the government. We're talking about instances of an alleged serial rapist or sexual offender coming in, going out, and nothing at all. No attempts to engage with these girls. No attempt whatsoever. I don't know. For me, like, I think those moments really signal to me that we're not ready for prime time. If anything at all, it really just set the pace for maybe what we should expect. That it's just going to be the usual, our women's empowerment stuff. That's what we're going to continue seeing, unfortunately.
It's going to be the whatchamacallit, the workshops, and then you pay
the
people,
trainings,
the trainings, and then you go home. That's it.
Building capacity of people.
And when you're done, you do a report, and that's it.
I honestly think gender is a money-making scheme in this country. So anything around gender or women's rights is just a money-making scheme.
Because it's trendy.
Yeah. Because you do one thing, but then there's no follow-up. And I'm saying this as someone who works in this field, who's financially benefiting from it too. The work is not being done at all. Like, it's the 1-2 thing, and then kuneka am lum say am, kuneka binda lower binda sarasi maybe, and then that's it. And then you go. Like, I really like. You know, I keep thinking about, you know, back when you just start this work and then you have it in your head that there's going to be so much that you're going to do. There's going to be so many changes. And then eventually you see how the system works. You see how burnt out and exhausted you are. And then you just have to be like, you know what? And that's it.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes you do it for your own well-being as well. Because, yes, you come in with all of that energy. Yes, you come in with all of that passion and you want to do things. But you get to a point, I think what happens is you realize that you don't really have all that power. And the people who have the power are not willing to do the work. And so there are limitations on what you can do. You can only do so much. You understand? And it happens all the time. How we're using our own money to fund our work, how we're using our own money to support victims and all of that. Because we just don't have the power to... What we can do is the advocacy we do. It's engaging communities. It's, you know, using our voices and saying what we need to say. But the fact is that we, as we don't have the power.
And I want to add to that. Because I hate hearing how, like, you know, it's always, the onus is always placed on the advocators and the people doing the advocacy.
Where are the feminists?
Everything.
Yep.
Oh, the feminists are not commenting on this. The feminist is the feminist that. But there's no country and there's no, like, you know, certain structure in any country that will dem if the government is not going along with them. So you're not going to expect a Gambia or any kind of anything in this country to function properly if that's not the government's priority. So it's what, you know, you can sit there and be comfortable on your keyboard, these you men specifically, and be like, oh, at least we're saying the feminists are doing this, the feminists are doing that, and change is going to come. The change is not up to us. We can only do so much, but the rest of it can only happen if there's a solid government backing. And even if you bully the government 1-2, if their heart is not in it and if they don't care, it's not going to go. Because yes, the government have been bullied into passing, you know, the FGM laws and all of these laws, but have they been enacted the way they're supposed to? No. So, like, sometimes you sit down and you're like, what's the point even?
In terms of achievements and progress also, what breaks my heart about all of this is it's easy to sit in your house in Combo with your running water, your electricity, your internet, and say, things are working for Gambian women. Gambian women are progressing. Gambian women are empowered. When really, you don't even need to leave the Greater Banjul area, because I think people always say rural. No, you just need to go into some of the communities in the Greater Banjul area, and you realize how bad.
Not even community. Your next door neighbor.
Your next door neighbor. Like, literally, a lot of us live around communities where, you have women who are living through abuse, women who have, girls who have had to drop out of school and be given away in marriage because their parents, it's not even about culture, but simply because their parents could not afford to put them through school anymore. And yes, people bring up the argument that, for example, there's free education. Yes, there's free education, but who's buying the uniforms? Who's buying the school, the shoes? Who's buying the books? It's just free tuition. You go up country, and my heart breaks when you go there as an NGO or as a private individual, and you're talking to women and they see you as someone who is coming to help them, or who has the power to change their lives, and they start narrating their problems to you. They start telling you things like, ñun suñu am doom, dañoo sonna because lopitani amul doctor, or amuñ yoon sax pour aga si lopitan bi. You get sick, you go to a hospital, the hospital is locked because there are no nurses, nobody's there to attend to you. We need water, we have to walk kilometers to get water to cook our food and to wash our clothes and, to drink. These are basic things that should be available to everyone, but especially to women who have the ultimate responsibility of keeping their homes and their children in a patriarchal society such as the Gambia. And, our government, or all our past governments, are good at standing, in front of mics and saying Gambian women are empowered. We're doing this to empower Gambian women. What kind of empowering have you done for Gambian women, really? Gambian women make up more than half of the Gambia's population. Literally, more than half of the Gambian population is made up of Gambian women. But when you look at the economic scale, Gambian women are the poorest people in this country. They have no socio-economic backbone. You get rice and bopper every day. To come and feed grown men who are sitting at home. Di xaar seen jabar yi pour ñu dundal leen, or di xaar seen yaay pour ñu ñëw dundal leen. They're paying school fees. People frown upon this, but we all know this is the reality in our homes. Women go to the market to sell produce, to go back home and toga.
It's really, really stressful, and it's really, really depressing seeing it. And again, that's why I get so annoyed when people that, do not work in the field or do not do anything can just open their mouths and be like, at least there's progress.
What progress?
Or criticize what's being
done.
Literally, what progress? And also, what percentage of Gambian women are living this progress or seeing this progress? Because even those who we see as progressive, or they're benefiting from the gains that have been made, they're still living through stressful situations. Because, you're a woman who has a job, you're still required to uphold the traditional view of, being the homekeeper. Meanwhile, you also have a 9-to-5 job like your husband, and, you're both close from work. He gets to sit, put his feet up. You get to, this is the average Gambian home. You have to go lijanti rare or whatever. You have to lijanti the kids' uniform, their homework. Everything falls back on you. So literally, what progress have we made in terms of abuse? It's very easy for people to sit and say, oh, this is so wrong, but what are you doing to stop it? What are you doing aside from sitting there and asking, where are the feminists? Langaref.
And it is these same feminists that when we speak, it's like, dimale len ñu, noppi len, just shut up, go, what,
These are the same people that they know their friends are abusing their wives, or said abusing. Like, yangi talk, and you're seeing this happen in front of you. You're not saying anything, but then you still want to go ahead and shift the onus on women that you don't know, that you have no business knowing, but then you've decided that they have to be the ones to come and solve what's going on in your household and uphold every single pillar that you are not upholding for yourself. It's hypocrisy through and through, and it's lazy. It's very lazy.
It's hypocrisy everywhere, because even the so-called woke men who are allies or call themselves feminists and fight for women's rights are the same people who, after they've done all the yelling and screaming and writing the Facebook posts, you see them standing up or, you know, allying, I don't know what word to use, dégguma English. Nga gis len ñu dem taxaw, you know, di waxtaan these same abuses that they were condemning or the uplift ñu seen liggéey bi.
They're their friends. They are their friends.
I mean, it's a for me, like, it's a point of all of us and by all of us I mean women, getting to a point where we understand that men will always protect one another.
Yeah.
Because the idea for me, you realize it very quickly when they choose to be silent about these things, it's because they're hoping that other people stay silent when their own stories come out. And so for me, I mean, I stopped a long time ago, stopped looking to men to say anything at all. They just will not hold one another accountable. And so I think it's what makes our work much more difficult because you're calling for accountability, you're calling for justice, you're calling for all of these things. But a lot of the time, that's all you can do. Yep. That's what you can do. It's not within our power, you know, to dispense justice. It's not our responsibility. We're not in those spaces. You understand? And so for me, with every Women's Day, there's always that reflection. We have the events, the march past, definitely nice speeches and all of that. But I think for us, it's how do we, you know, stop and think about taking care of ourselves for the work that we do, so we don't get to a point where what I would hate really is to be so frustrated and so discouraged and so disappointed that I get to a point where I'm like, you know what, I'm done. And I've been close to that point a lot of times because you're dealing with people and you know that this is about their lives. You know, it could be a hashtag somewhere, but away from that hashtag, it's somebody's life. Yeah. It's a whole human being going through this. And then you build their hope as a government. I remember because with the Surviving Melville thing, MOJ released this whole statement to say, we're here for victims, blah, blah. If you have a story, you want to come forward, call these numbers. You know, and we were all hopeful. We're like, okay, finally, something from the ministry, and then nothing. It's been yata years later, almost 2 years, and then nothing. So for me, I don't know. It's really, it's always the community action, and for me, it even stands out even clearer. So with my research, my research focuses on basically measuring or trying to analyze how much work the government has done with regards creating awareness around FGM, because they actually have a legal obligation under the Maputo Protocol to do that. Yeah. And everything I find is being done by CSOs. All of the work, the community engagement, the greater majority of it is being done by CSOs. Even the policies, you would think that the education policy will have something on FGM. You would think that the health policy will have something on FGM. You're not getting any of that. And the worst is, so at the time, Women's Bureau, there was the National FGM Steering Committee, you know, and you can't even see their action plans. You can't find them online. You can't find anything. You can't see reports on what activities they've done. All you see is, oh, we trained this number of people, we trained that number of people. Leave that to the smaller organizations to work within their communities and build capacity. Leave that to the smaller organizations. Do the bigger things. Support them. Provide funding for them. You know, do the coordination that needs to happen. And I think writing that and just getting all of the information, for me, it was like, you know what? Counting on these people, and it's not just about this current government. It's all the it's all of the ones that we've had. You know, it's like government is not, and I say this all the time, the government is not your friend. No. They're not here to serve your interests. As much as they use that as their campaign lines and all, they're not here to serve your interests. So we are on our own. So for me, really, the past year or so has been about taking care of myself, you know, and making sure I don't get to a point where I am like, I can't do this anymore, because I really don't want to get to that point.
And even though, you know, you're talking about this in terms of FGM, I keep thinking about the COVID relief itself. And how it's been more like, you know, CSOs and also just private citizens putting up GoFundMes and making and that's literally more effort I've seen than anything the government has done.
No, please, the government distributed Sakumalo and Bidongi Diulin and Saku Sukur one time.
I think they're doing a second round right now. But even with that distribution, you know, how were people selected? Did it go to the people who needed it the most? Are we sure they need identifying that these are the most vulnerable they actually got?
I know someone who she had to be in line to receive Malo Diulin Sukur for 3 days.
Jeez.
Every day she would wake up, go with her kids, pick a spot, and then Momunyo do whatever she's supposed to do, and then Mudem. on 3 days mu ngi rang before me muna am all she had was saku malo and lifin nakala saku suku. That's all she had.
At some point,
this is someone who's
getting all the 3.
Yeah,
3 items laying down.
3 items. At
so
some
they
point
got to a point where
it.
I know I heard the stories about rural communities, for example, where house being drop for saku malo, house being drop for saku suku, house being lifin. You understand? So what are you gonna do with that?
And I'm not your hamne. Like you're supposed to get a full bag of rice, full gallon of diolin, and there were people who were being given. So they like, yo, how many people are in your household? You say, let's say like ñun 3 la or stuff like that. You're 3, but you're still poor. Half lañ la jox, half saku malo, half saku sukur. Nga dem sa yoon.
And I'm thinking about this in terms of the advocacy around COVID and how you expect people to stay home and you expect the social distance. I mean, and I'm talking about from like the fact that for a lot of people it's not possible to stay alive and also stay alive.
Literally, that's literally what it is.
Yeah.
I heard someone say, "Suma toge skid we kan moy dundal suma njabot bi," and that's literally the question for majority Gambian population. If you stay at home, who's going to feed your family?
I think that hits very close for me because so in my work in comms and basically raising awareness and sharing safety messages, that's something that I always it's a conflict that I've always had throughout the year doing that work. It's a conflict that I've always had, and the biggest conflict I had especially was when we were communicating about self-isolation. And I'm thinking, in this country, like how many homes are ideal for somebody to self-isolate. You understand? Guidelines here are talking about live in a room, you're okay. Now what about families that are sharing one room? Who goes where? Who goes, So for me, like, it was really, really conflicting. But then it was also from a point of, we need to share the messages. This is what I am able to do in the position that I am in. Everything else that needs to be sorted out by the other people who have the power. But beyond the power, they have the mandate and the responsibility to do that. So it was really, really hard. It was a huge struggle because you tell people and they tell you, if the COVID doesn't kill me, the hunger is gonna kill me. This was a very popular line, and people were using it. And as much as we don't want to hear it, it is fact.
It's the truth.
It is fact. So it is really. I think basically what we're highlighting is how difficult it is to share public health messaging within the context of poverty and inequalities and inequities. It's hard.
Behavioral change is not that simple. No. And you can know better, but that doesn't mean that you're able to do better given the circumstances that you're in. I'm thinking about it even like I'm gonna go into a little public health lecture here, guys. But I'm thinking about even like in small things like cigarette smoking. Everyone knows cigarette smoking is bad, but are they taking in consideration certain reasons why people are smoking? Are they taking into consideration the stress, or they're trying to limit the hunger, or there's so many things. So it's like it's the same with COVID. Yes, we know COVID is bad. Yes, we know that it's killing people, but like what do people fear more than the possibility of dying?
Hunger. Or catching COVID. And I think that question alone would have been able to help everybody who's acting think more about what actions we're taking. It could have really, really defined the response because I think it's very much linked to the whole COVID denial we're seeing as well. And it will get even more complicated. Now we're talking about vaccines. It's going to get even more complicated. So for me, that question that you asked, for me, if it was asked right at the start, it could have informed the type of response.
But this discussion also reminded me of in terms of the precautions and stuff, there was constant reminder for people to wash their hands. And we have a lot of communities where it's not the amuin taps there. People have taps, but nawek just be naweking. So people do not have, if you don't have access to running water, or you're gonna go days do am do danga neka di worsiket jambore pour am do, how are you going to keep basic sanitation? And then in terms of the mask regulation time, you'd see someone who doesn't have a mask. You're in the car going to work or going somewhere, you get to a checkpoint and the police ask you to step out of the vehicle. You step out of the vehicle and you're forced to buy a mask that is being sold by someone who literally has them in his hands, walking around. I want mask. Nga jël natabula em nga sol nga dem sa yoon. That is literally how we were living. So I think in terms of our public health regulations, it's like the country just dove into things without really analyzing what needs to be done to protect people. If you're asking people to wear masks compulsorily, are you, the government, providing these masks? Because from what I saw, it was private individuals.
At any point provide masks?
No, from what I saw, it was private individuals and CSOs actually hiring or contracting tailors to manufacture these masks and then giving them out to people. There are people who went to the markets and were giving out masks to market sellers. Yeah, you know, they go around homes and communities, especially in the rural areas, and give people masks. But then you'll meet into these regulations. What have you put in place to make sure that people can easily comply with these regulations without, you know, suffering more harm?
I mean, the padiums that they say from not traveling the whole year could have bought people masks, you know. But it's with Gambia, it's development by GoFundMe. That's really what we're seeing.
It is development by
people
GoFundMe.
People getting sick who need to get, everything is on GoFundMe.
Yeah, and in terms of the COVID response recently I was working on something, and we came across this group that works with the elderly. And one of the things that I think they're called Aging with a Smile. And one of the things that they highlighted was the fact that in the government's COVID response, elderly people were completely ignored or neglected. They literally had no specific support for elderly people, most of whom, some of them live by themselves, or they don't have the means to go get a mask or, you know, get sanitary products and things like that. And, you know, you've instilled a lockdown and these people are now at risk.
And it's sad because even with the elderly population, like they're the ones that are most vulnerable to they were the ones that were most vulnerable to COVID.
You would think,
But then it's like we're like, okay, fine, let's just sacrifice them. Me, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to sacrifice my mom. So
same.
It's a lot.
At some point, I think there was that attitude, and again, it comes back. I really like that you asked that question because then it would have really, you know, guided what responses. Because at some point I was sitting and thinking, what kind of responses? Are you just copy pasting responses based on what you see being done globally? Why don't we have something that's relevant to like our context? That works based on what kind of people we have in this country and what kind of life they are living.
No, I'm thinking about how I feel like who was in that COVID response team? Like, who are the main people? Because if it's just people that are STEM majors, that are people, you know, that are just the doctors and all of that, you tend to, and you're not looking at socio-economic perspectives, you're not looking at, you know, you're not asking sociologists to be in the mix, you're not asking economics and social scientists in general, you're not asking social scientists, then how do you expect things to work? Because it's one thing to implement a certain law or a certain idea or anything, but it's not going to work if you don't know how the people are going to respond.
I know. And I think to close off on this, I just have to say that the Gambia government owes, especially market women, reparations for economic loss. For huge economic loss. Boom, mom, you owe them reparations. So cough up the money, the per diem money you've been saving. We've looked at the problems, and there are many problems, but we can't look at problems without also considering what solutions may be available. Because if we're being honest, we're still dealing with COVID. We're going to be dealing with COVID for the next few months, from what I can see. Or years.
Okay, at least the next, let's say 2023.
Yeah, our public health expert says for the next 2 years, we should be, we should consider that we'll be dealing with COVID. So in that, what solutions do we see, especially in relation to, women's rights, women's lives, equity and equality? How do we see that working? What solutions do we have?
If I could burn the government to the ground and start another shit. You told me to say it, so I said it. No, but
fireburn everything.
Fireburn them, man. But I feel like in order for things to start moving, we have to go back. And there's a lot of things that need to be done from, it needs to be restarted. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm a public health person, but I'm more technically a health sociologist. Mm-hmm. And in order to know how things will work, you have to be able to know what exactly led us there to begin with.
Yeah.
So until we're able to peel back the layers completely and start from scratch and we have to acknowledge that the system is not working.
Yes.
And then go from there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same in women, in terms of gender stuff, in terms of COVID, just everything that's wrong right now. Mm-hmm. It's wrong because we're not acknowledging that it's wrong. So that's how I feel. So I think it's about starting fresh, and it's about also having the government. When you're in it, you're having something and nekun sugarcoat, and then having like, okay, like having diverse opinions and diverse views, diverse opinions, and making sure that the people that are working are actually working to work and are not there just because okay, this person worked here before. But if they're not, if you haven't seen,
hire the right people for the right job.
you have to hire the right people. That's how I feel.
I don't know. I think if you're gonna find a solution, you start with acknowledging that there's a problem, and I think that's where we are stuck. It's how, once you start to point out the challenges and the problems, you're seen as anti-government, you're seen as anti-particular political party, or you're just seen to be negative. But I don't think we can move forward if we don't stop to acknowledge, that we have problems, we have challenges, and take the steps to identify what these challenges are. Because then that is what will guide us into developing solutions. Because for me, I don't know, I say a lot of the time that I've lost hope in them. And to be honest, that's how I feel most of the time. But I can't give up on Gambia. That's also one thing that I have, acknowledged. It's something that I recognize in me. So for me, it's how do we ensure that there is more support, especially for the people who are doing the work, but also the point that Hadi has made. And I think it's interesting. It's Women's Day, and we keep talking about women's leadership. I do not subscribe to the school of thought where we're like, just put any woman there. I don't, and call me a bad feminist, call me whatever you want. But that is, I have a problem even with the quota system. Because I feel like it's a really, really easy pathway to tokenism. And that is what we continue to see. So for me, I think understanding that when we speak about women's leadership, it's also people who are competent to take up these positions. And when we talk about competencies, it's not just about who's educated, who has a degree, who has this, who has that. But beyond that, what kinds of values do people have? These women that we're placing in leadership positions, what values do they have? You understand? What's their drive? Are they there for themselves, or are they there for the collective, for the greater good? And so when we talk representation, when we talk leadership, and that's what the theme is about. It's about women's leadership in a COVID era, and hopefully a post-COVID era. I think these are the questions we need to ask. Which women are getting those seats? Which women are representing us? And do they have the interests of the collective at heart, or are they really just there for themselves?
I agree. I'm very big on just because somebody is a woman. I don't believe in the whole kumbaya, women should stick together nonsense, because when we do that, we end up not really focusing on the issues at hand, but then we try to play nice. Versus no one tells men that they need to play nice with each other. It's only women that we have to,
be best friends all the time
and forge fake sisterhoods over nothing.
And I think there's little accountability even when that happens.
Well, I think my solution is one, and it's directed to the government, and it's pay the frontline workers. Pay them their salaries, pay them their allowances, risk allowances. This motivates them, to do their job properly. If I'm doing a risky job like collecting COVID samples and testing COVID samples and just dealing with persons who have acquired the disease, at least I deserve some form of compensation from it. So, pay them, give them their money, run them their checks. Pay that guy. Yeah, that brings us to the end of this podcast. But before we close, of course, we're going to have our favorite segment of this podcast, and that is the Musso of the Week. Jama, please do the honors.
Absolutely honored. Absolutely honored to get a positive part of this whole thing. So I know we've been ranting, but like I said at the start, it's also an opportunity for us to recognize, the work, especially that women are doing. So yes, there are those structural barriers, there are all of those challenges, but women are still striving. Women are still winning in so many different ways. And so on this episode, it's only natural that we dedicate Musso of the Week to the many female frontline workers that have been doing an amazing job as part of the COVID response in the Gambia. So many of you remain unseen, so many of you remain unknown. You've dealt with so many challenges, including stigma, including being discriminated against, dealing with not being paid. You've been infected yourselves. You've been at risk. You potentially have put your families at risk. So we just want to say that we see you, we appreciate you, we value all of the many contributions, and especially the sacrifices that you continue to make to ensure that you are contributing towards the safety, the health, and the well-being of everyone in the Gambia. We honor your work, and we want to say a very, very big thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank
you so much.
Lolen di def mom ken mënu ko. So thank you for everything.
Anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as usual, we're waiting for your questions, comments, feedback, everything. Just send it our way.
It's been an absolutely wonderful rant. I feel a lot lighter. Having taken that off my chest, so we can go ahead and say, let's have a wonderful Women's Day, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, we know you guys have your thoughts. We've absolutely loved all of the feedback we've been receiving on the episodes we've put out. So if you have any contributions you want to make, if you want to join us to continue dragging this government that refuses to show up for women, join us on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook. We're everywhere on social media as Musso Podcast. And you can contribute to the conversation using the hashtag MussoPod. That's MUSSOPOD. We look forward to engaging with you.
I especially look forward to hearing all the things you have to say about the government. I live for it, and I'm ready for it. But again, thank you all for tuning in. We want to thank Right Click as always, amazing production team. Thank you for being patient with us. And I hope you all have a great rest of the week. I hope the men are paying in their reparations. And we hope to hear from you shortly.
Happy Women's Day.
Happy Women's Day. Bye.
Happy Musso Day.
Yes, happy Musso Day.
Bye.